Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Talk About It, the official podcast series of Phenomenology Club. As you can see, I am cammed up because, like I said in the past few uploads, I know that people enjoy having a video image of the speaker because it feels like we're like together, right? I don't particularly love being cammed up because it's already kind of confusing having like multiple things going on, like sending my audio through a router so that you can hear the dictionary definition, pronunciations, and all this shit. And now I gotta worry, is there a video stream? And also, like I've said, I upload all of these to Spotify, so I don't want it to be too much of a video thing because, it has to also be listenable to people who don't have a video image. So even though I have things like this web browser pulled up in the side thing panel, I'm going to try not to reference it too much because this has to be listenable for all our friends over on Spotify who can't see. They're digitally blind. Anyway, thank you for being here. And anyone who is listening on Spotify, these all happen on YouTube initially. So hop on over to youtube.com/phenomenology club if you'd like to see my beautiful fucking face. Another reason I don't like to cam up is because I have a stupid fucking haircut because, as an avid Adderall abuser, I like twirl my hair a lot, like this, not even twirl it, I like pull on it, and it got so bad that I just had this mass of hair in the back of my head that was like short, so I had to get an undercut, basically the most art school haircut ever. And so I'm growing it out right now and it just looks fucking stupid. I'm sick of it. Anyway, how are you guys doing? What's going on? Is everyone okay? I want to talk about vaccines, about whether or not we are morally responsible to take them, which obviously is a very, very hot topic right now. I mean, it's always a hot topic, but it's a hot topic especially right now in the midst of coronavirus. Somebody said, or I think I saw a few people say, that undercuts a no-go, says codeine cunt. I know. But you know what? I had a practical reason for getting one, so leave me alone. Only a judge can judge me. And you're not a judge, are you, codeine cunt? So get the fuck out of here. Anyway, what was I just saying? Vaccinations. Oh yeah, wait, I saw somebody said that with all the news going on, the favorite word of newscasters and media people right now is amidst. I'm more of a fan of in the midst of, but I thought that was funny because it made me realize how much I too have been saying in the midst and also amidst, in the midst of this coronavirus. But how else are we supposed to phrase it? What else are we in relation, in proximity to this global pandemic? We're in the midst of it. Come on. It's interesting because, yeah, how do you word such a thing? When we are confronted with, that's not as fun. It makes you think more of like a one-on-one relationship. The virus is more nebulous and doesn't really have strictly defined rigid contours. It's not so much an individual entity. That's why we're in the midst of it. Anyway, let's talk about vaccines. I saw that some of you were getting into it already before I even went live. I want to read some of your comments. So maybe we could use that as the launching pad for this conversation. This conversation that is so heavy and heavily debated. Clearly, people have very strong opinions about it. You all are typing paragraphs in here before we even get started. So let me read some of what you had to say. Delilah, hello Delilah. Delilah says, before this starts, I'm going to say yes, it is your moral duty. The health of the community is more important than someone's personal choice to not get poked with a don't get sick needle for 2 seconds. Well, that's interesting language, Delilah. That's a little frisky. You got some strong opinions. Danny Bowen says, for the coronavirus stuff, sure. That's in response to the question of this upload. Is it my moral duty to get vaccinated? Danny says, for the coronavirus stuff, sure, it is important because there is so much uncertainty as to the ramifications, so collectively we need to prevent as much as possible. I'd say the same for vaccines for other illnesses too, but because we know more about them, people in essence can have a choice because likely most others will have been vaccinated beforehand, so it ain't. Well, that's interesting. Bringing up some other variables that orbit this discussion, very relevant variables. Because the question is not simply, I don't feel like getting vaccinated, right? This is not why people say that it is not their responsibility to get vaccinated. There are reasons that people don't want to get vaccinated. And what are some of these reasons? And what are the most popular narratives about these reasons in public discourse? Because, I think we've all been exposed to the narrative that anti-vaxxers are a bunch of crazy people, most often moms and women. Let me just say that because I'm not going to go into some feminist diatribe, but I do think that it is relevant to think about what kinds of people are typically talked about when we talk about anti-vaxxers. And that group of people, in my opinion, is hysterical women. Just saying. It's always hysterical women, hysterical moms, and stupid moms, stupid women that think that vaccinations are going to give their kids autism. And that's another angle that we can hate them for, right? Because these stupid, hysterical women think that vaccines cause autism. What a fucking erroneous idea. How stupid, how silly. But you know what? I'm just going to come out and say what I have to say too, because let's all get fucking frisky in here. I would like to say that I think that the amount of hostility that people that get grouped in with this anti-vaxxers group, the amount of hostility they experience in these kinds of conversations is, I'm going to say it, unwarranted. I think that it's over the top. And I think that it really does not do a service to the kinds of arguments that these women, because they're mostly women, let's just be real, are being accused of having. I don't know what the start of that sentence I just tried to say was. I don't think that their viewpoints are being accurately reflected in public discourse. For one, this idea that they all think that their kids are going to get autism or their kids have autism. I spoke to a woman who was an anti-vaxxer not long ago, and she was telling me how her child, she believes, experienced neurological consequences of a vaccination that was mandatory for them to attend public school. And she told me, and this is something that I did not know, is that the CDC doesn't even lie or try to make secret of the fact that some of the side effects of these vaccines that are mandatory for public school attendance actually can cause neurological impairment. And if you don't believe me, look, I've pulled it up. cdc.gov, their website. Let's look at it together. So this is the CDC's official website, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention in the United States. Let's look at their website. This is their vaccines subpage where they go through these side effects. And this first one, you can see, if you look at the literally the first entry for side effects, this is the DTaP vaccine. And as far as I know, please correct me if I'm wrong, if anybody knows, as far as I know, this vaccine is mandatory for children, I believe under the age of 7 or something, for them to attend public school. One of the benefits of this vaccine is it prevents against tetanus. I remember having to get my tetanus shot, and I guess it was this one. I'm not really entirely sure, but as far as I know, this is a mandatory vaccine, and you could see here, it says very rarely But the fact that the CDC even puts this on their website, I think, is testament to the fact that this has been proven, because otherwise why the fuck would they put it up here? Very rarely, long-term seizures, coma, lowered consciousness, or permanent brain damage may happen after DTaP vaccination. So this is not just some conspiracy that women have come up with. And I think that this is the thing that they're speaking of when people in the public, those of us who are not anti-vaxxers, because let me just say that outright too, I'm not an anti-vaxxer or anything, but I'm just saying I think that these conversations do deserve a lot of nuance. I mean, if people have children that have had permanent brain damage and lowered consciousness, the thing that all these assholes in the public are accusing them of thinking is autism, which it is not. If that's what they're being accused of, as being hysterical and stupid, and there's no merit to these kinds of accusations, but then the CDC itself says that this is a possibility, and some of these people actually have children that have suffered these consequences, these side effects of these mandatory vaccinations, then we should talk about it, don't you fucking think? Long-term seizures, coma, lowered consciousness, or permanent brain damage. That's crazy. And if you go through all of these, there's more. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a doctor. I don't know. Let's look at polio. Is polio mandatory? I don't know which ones are mandatory. But here we go. Polio has a risk of death. Okay. Influenza. What does influenza have a risk of? Severe allergic reaction, other serious injury, or death. Yada, yada, yada. Anyway, so I think that these kinds of things deserve conversation, especially because this is the reason that a lot of people don't want to get vaccinated, or they don't want their kids to get vaccinated. And this kind of discussion, I think, is just a philosophical fucking landmine. Because on the one hand, yeah, it's not as simple as I don't want to get vaccinated. I don't have to do anything anyone wants me to do, which sounds stupid and selfish at face value, but I think that even there's something to be talked about. The idea that the government can force something upon your very person, upon your very body, and a government as corrupt as ours, and especially our healthcare industry, which we know is held to practically no standard. And I mean, look at the standards for like the FDA. I mean, their standards are so lax. I don't know if you guys saw that documentary on Netflix. I forget what it was called. It was really interesting. I forget what it was called. But it was basically about how the approval process for medical devices, period, is so lax. Like, you can get your medical device approved by the FDA if it simply resembles another device enough that was approved. But that one might have been approved following the same exact process. And so we have people that are getting things like hip implants that are literally rotting inside of people and causing things like symptoms of dementia, and their doctors don't even know about this. They're being diagnosed with things like Alzheimer's disease because their doctors don't even know that there is a risk that their hip implant is rotting inside of them and causing them dementia. Like, our healthcare industry fucking sucks, and the FDA is held to no standard, and the CDC is similarly held to very lax standards. I mean, the CDC, if I'm not mistaken, doesn't even require randomized clinical trials. The FDA, I believe, does require randomized trials, and the CDC does not. So that's pretty fucking crazy. I cannot call a group of people stupid or hysterical or anything for a thing like at least wanting to have a conversation about the ethics of being forced to either vaccinate yourself or your children. When we know that the institutions in charge of these kinds of things are held to practically no standard. It's not simply an issue of putting trust in science or putting trust in your own InfoWars crazy ass fucking stupid conspiracies. It's that the CDC and the FDA are not really held to a real scientific standard in and of themselves. And a lot of these people being called anti-vaxxers are actually not even anti-vaxxers. A lot of them are people who vaccinated their kids because they wanted to. They wanted to protect their children, and their children ended up experiencing some of these side effects that the CDC does not pretend don't exist. So, I mean, I think the amount of vitriol and hostility these women, hysterical, stupid, fucking dumb soccer moms, Karens, I think that the amount of vitriol launched at them is really unwarranted. Can you imagine having a kid that had a thing like permanent brain damage because of a vaccination, and you simply want to make this information known to the public? You want the public to be more aware of the risks. You want the CDC to be held to a stricter standard, as I'm sure we all do, just like we also want the FDA to be held to a higher standard. These women aren't even necessarily saying no vaccines. A lot of them are simply campaigning for stricter criteria for the testing, for the development of these kinds of things. So that's my first point. But of course, it's not that simple. And as Danny was just saying earlier, I think that depending on the specific vaccine in question, depending on the specific problem we're trying to deal with, there will be all different types of variables to consider here. I mean, a thing like coronavirus, right? A lot of the world's leading epidemiologists and experts, clinical experts, are saying things like, oh, we're not going anywhere. Quarantine will not be done in the foreseeable future until we develop a vaccine. That is our only hope for being able to move past this moment in time so we can resume normal life as we know it. And so if this is true, SS Retrozone, they're gonna cancel you, Bethany. I don't give a fuck. Who? Twitter? Twitter is so insufferable. I just like can't even go on anymore. I thought I was just taking a little hiatus, like, oh, I'll be back when I feel like it, but I just have not felt like it. Every time I go on there, I'm just like, ugh. Everyone, what are you talking about? No nuance. So it's not fun. It used to be fun. It's not fun anymore. You have to restrict everything you say. So it's just, you can't say shit. We could never have a conversation like this. I mean, also, just because of the very format, everything has to be condensed in a cute little fucking package. And that's the truth. I just gave you the truth in 260 characters or less. Sam Hollingshead, Twitter is so gay. That's right. And so are you, Sam. And so am I. We are gay. Yeah, Twitter sucks. Fuck Twitter. Fuck you, Twitter. If you're listening, cancel me. I don't give a fuck. Have I said anything crazy? Have I? No. I'm not an anti-vaxxer, like I said. I think that this conversation requires so much nuance. I mean, at every level, like I said. For one, the very question of whether or not we think it is the government's right to mandate what we do with our very bodies. If I just say yes, just yes, because what? I need to come up with a solid justification for why. If I say, yes, the government does have a right to mandate vaccines, it can't simply be because this is for the good of the public. This promotes health and sustainability. Because if I use that justification for why the government should be allowed to tell me what to do with my body, then what would be my defense in the instance of a thing like fighting for the right to abortion, right? Because someone could easily say, well, abortion should be illegal and the government should have the right to tell you what to do with your body because it promotes health and sustainability. It promotes the sustainability of our population and our citizenry. If you are actively compromising your own health, if you are and terminating a life, which it could be in some certain incarnation. I'm not one of these people that's like, fetuses aren't people. I don't care. A fetus could be a person or a fetus could not be a person. It depends on what we decide to call it. It's a potential person. Who cares? I don't care if abortion is murder. I think you could still defend it under those circumstances. It's justifiable murder, in my opinion. But regardless, not to get off topic, what was I saying? Oh yeah, somebody could easily take that kind of justification that, that the government should have the right to tell us what to do with our bodies because it promotes livelihood and sustainability of our population, to say that this is why abortion should also be illegal and the government has the right to tell you not to have one, right? What would be my defense? If like when it comes to a thing like bodily autonomy and what the government's right is, As far as mandating what we do with our own bodies, this is not something that we should just simply say, get the fuck over it, you crazy, stupid, hysterical moms. You know, like, just and make stupid memes and shit about like Kat Von D and stuff. Like, get over it, you're all dumb. Like, give the like. It's so ironic to me that the same people who claim to be so critical and so aware of all of the various ways that our government and our government mandated institutions of science and clinical health are so clearly corrupt by financial motivations, by all types of ulterior motives. These same people will just tell you to get the fuck over it. No conversation is allowed when it comes to a thing like vaccination. Why? Why would there be no conversation here? This is an incredibly relevant topic to the lives of everybody, yourself included. If you're not invested in having a conversation here, then what the fuck kind of conversation could you ever be invested in having about anything? God damn it. Grow up, Twitter. I'm talking to you. Danny, I'm so glad you bring this up. Danny just said, or is it Danny? I don't know how to, there's only one N, sorry. Another factor could be age as well. You get most vaccines when younger, when you don't necessarily have a choice. I'm so glad you bring this up because this is something that I was thinking about earlier too, and I didn't want to forget to say it. That like the whole ethics of making your own decision as a child also, I think, comes into play. Because, I mean, I'm somebody who believes that in the United States especially, I don't know really how it works in other world governments, but in the United States of America, children have like no rights. I think it's so fucked up how children are basically just like left to the whims of whatever their parents desire. Whatever your parents desire for you is what you fucking get. And your parents can do things like isolate you from the rest of the community. They can homeschool you. They can make sure that you have no access to the outside world. They can, you know, abuse you and no one will ever fucking know because you live in my fucking cupboard and no one's gonna check on you. And if I say you get a vaccine, you do. If I say you don't get a vaccine, you don't. I mean, this is a part of the conversation as well, and I think it absolutely needs to be had, that it should be children's right to decide too. At the same time, it's like, well, where does this end? Because if children have the right to make such incredible decisions about their own bodily autonomy, then like, can a 10-year-old girl get titty implants? Like, can 9-year-olds consent to sex? Like, pedophiles would fucking love that. Like, what are the ethical implications of this line of thinking too? I mean, the philosophical problems posed by this question is just enormous, which is even more reason to feel that a conversation is required here. God, I'm losing my train of thought. I'm just so fucking excited. But I think, of course, like we're saying here, we all seem to agree. Well, I don't know. I'm talking to like myself. Was I just describing Harry Potter as his retro zone? Yes, I was. Clearly, this is all incredibly circumstantial, right? Every new illness poses a new specific threat and a new specific plan of action. I mean, the coronavirus is a perfect example of that. You don't even need to think about that. Danny, I'm not even going to speak on that issue. That is a whole other issue. But I mean, clearly the coronavirus poses a very specific threat, and that's the reason that we are in such a unique set of conditions right now. Because how the fuck, I mean, if it wasn't so unique, we would not all be in quarantine. So clearly our strategizing towards positive outcomes is also going to be similarly unique, right? Like Danny was saying earlier, you know, for other vaccines, there might be more freedom, at least in your own worldview. You might feel some sort of more ethical freedom as it relates to your right to make a decision whether or not you want to get something like the polio vaccination, because polio is a disease that, because of vaccines, has pretty much been ruled to be, not really a serious threat anymore. Because at this point it's so infrequent, because enough people got Sam, coronavirus, but it just makes you extremely homosexual. I mean, I'm feeling the effects. I don't know about you. But, what were you just saying? Fuck, I lost my thought. You said homosexual and I just got too excited. Oh yeah, polio. Polio is not really like a threat to our livelihood anymore. It's so rare. I mean, the number of cases is, I think it's like under 1% of the world's population, maybe under 3%. And in a country like the United States of America, I mean, I don't even know if there's any cases. So if you do a thing like don't get vaccinated for polio, I mean, the ethical implications are much less severe than a thing like when we're dealing with coronavirus, when they're projecting that upwards of 70% of the United States population could become infected with this thing. If you don't get the polio vaccine, what's the likelihood you're going to catch polio? And what's the likelihood, if you do catch polio, you're going to be exposed to someone who didn't have this vaccine? Ooh, we have someone from South Africa. Nice. How do I pronounce your name? Sheepo? I think it's Sheepo. I can only speak from a South African context where vaccines are mandatory. This is probably due to a large amount of immune systems being compromised from factors such as tuberculosis, HIV, malnutrition, etc. My free will could be a very real threat to a multitude of people I coexist with. It's something in my context that would have pretty adverse effects to those in the working class in particular. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, like you're saying, I mean, being where you are geographically in the world, you feel a moral responsibility to your peers, because if you didn't get vaccinated, that the risk of others becoming infected with whatever thing you might carry and transmit to them could be super severe. And it's a real threat, versus a thing like polio where, yeah, like maybe it's not as much of a threat, so you might not feel as bad if you don't get that vaccination, if you just happen to be lazy and forget, and it's like, whatever, what are the chances I'm gonna get polio? But, if you're in an environment where lots of people have a thing like coronavirus, then what are the ethical implications of this? This is clearly a variable that needs to be considered, and it's probably the most important one, right? Because now it's not simply about your own bodily autonomy. It's about the health of all of those who are around you. So clearly, you must do something. Oh, I just had a thought, and I forget what it was. Damn. Oh yeah. Just to speak of the hypocrisy of the discourse for one more second. I think that these conversations are especially funny, or at least the ones that we've observed retroactively. They seem especially funny in the context of this, because what is one of the things that's been happening a lot now since coronavirus has happened. Now there's all of these statistics being quoted, like, look at how many people died from influenza every year and this and that. And it's like, do you all go get your influenza vaccines every year? If you don't get your flu vaccine every year, then you are a fucking anti-vaxxer, aren't you? Aren't you? So I'm not trying to hear any anti-vax criticisms from you people. Just want to say, unless you get your influenza vaccine. And of course, I already know they're going to be like, well, each strain is different and blah, 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 blah. Doesn't fucking matter. Go get your fucking vaccines, you fucking anti-vaxxers. I'm not trying to hear your shit. Anyway, even though obviously I'm skeptical and cynical and host a whole array of bad feelings towards some of the hypocrites that I see out here, who are really hypocrites on every issue, so it's not like this one makes them any more hypocritical than any of the other ones. But clearly this conversation is incredibly nuanced, and I think that what seems to be the sentiment here is that, you know, ultimately at the end of the day, it is true that questions of your own bodily autonomy do play into this question, especially as it relates to what government is allowed to do. But at the end of the day, people seem to think here, and I also agree, that your greater responsibility is to the group. Because at the end of the day, especially when it comes to things like government, I mean, government exists ultimately to be a thing that ensures the livelihood of the group. This is why we're supposed to have governments. I wouldn't say that the government necessarily fulfills this role in actuality, and perhaps it never has, but I'm definitely somebody that wants government to be a social contract, something that you enter into willingly, and with the understanding that you might be required to do things, your participation will be required, and ultimately your participation is required for the better of the group. You may have to do things that you don't want to do. Maybe like not murder your friend or not murder anybody. That's too bad. In some other non-governmental scenario, you know, that might be fine. There's no morality outside of this place. SS Retrozone says, are you pro-government, Bethany? Pro-government in the most abstract understanding of the word? Yes, absolutely. I am not pro our government. I am not pro any government. As far as I know, all governments are a bunch of corrupt fucking institutions that don't have the interest of individuals or the group in mind. But at baseline, yes, I'm absolutely pro-government, because at baseline, all government is supposed to be is a contract, really, where we enter into willingly as a group, and we try to make a community that benefits all of us, you know. That's the fucking point. That's why we created civilization, because in nature, without any law, we're all equally vulnerable. Well, not even equally vulnerable. We're vulnerable to varying degrees, you know. I've said it before, like, you know, whether you're elderly, a woman, a child, you are at an increased risk in, you know, nature from facing a thing like bodily harm if somebody larger or more physically able than you wants to destroy you. But even the alpha men of the group, even the Arnold Schwarzeneggers and the Sylvester Stallones and shit, they too, I think, face a unique threat. Because if you're the alpha male, then everybody wants to take you out. You're their greatest threat. They're going to kill you while you're sleeping, you know? So it's not even like, I mean, everybody's fucked in this hypothetical nature scenario. But this is part of why I say that even though I'm pro-government in the reasons, for the reasons I just described, I'm not pro-government as is, because what I believe, every government is obligated to offer its citizens at all times is the option to opt out. Government should not just be this thing you are born into and you are forced to do this or that because the government tells you to. The government should always, always have an option for people to leave, because government needs to be a thing that is entered into willingly, like I just said. It should be understood as a contract, almost like a club. You don't join a club unless you want to be a member of that club. And when you are a willing participant, you do things for the club. You make certain contributions, and you do so more happily, in my opinion, because you know that you want to be there, and you know that you can leave whenever the fuck you want, you know? So this also, in my opinion, adds a layer to these kinds of arguments too, because our government, in my opinion, is unethical at baseline for many reasons, but for this reason especially. So when it comes to a thing like vaccines, it's like, well, if I disagree with any of this, I can't even simply leave. That's a problem as well. And it also kind of resembles the kind of problems that we were talking about when it comes to matters of children and their autonomy. I mean, how much autonomy do you really have, period, if you can't even fucking leave this place? And the fact that we can't leave The fact that we can't simply opt out and go start our own government or whatever the fuck we want to do, I think this too is part of the reason that our government can get away with so much bullshit, and why they're just become more and more corrupt, and they're not beholden to any standard as this power disparity becomes greater, and we the citizens have so much less say and autonomy within our own governments. Then it doesn't matter. They're like, what are you gonna do? Leave? Oh, you can't. Where are you gonna go? There's nowhere to go. You can't leave. You can't make us do anything. We're the government, bitch. Fuck you up. It says Retrozone. Does the government decide what is ethical or unethical? As far as it's mandated, yes. They decide what is ethical or unethical by law, yes. But I wouldn't say that the government's ethics are necessarily compatible with what I think are the best ethics. Hey, and if you join Phenomenology Club, by the way, you can be a part of our New Jersey group, my hypothetical government, where we are trying to create the most ethical government ever. But anyway, 35 minutes. Okay, before I get out of here, well, I'm not leaving just yet because we haven't really even talked too much about this. Clearly, this is the point I was just harping on. The issue is not simply bodily autonomy, whether or not I deserve it. The issue is especially in these conversations, and as it relates to a thing like coronavirus, the issue is how much my decisions impact other people, So for a thing like coronavirus, if a vaccination came out, I personally would feel morally responsible to take it. At the same time, I would be greatly displeased if the narrative became on Twitter or something that anybody who has any sort of pause or fear or worries about what kind of standards underlie the development of this vaccine, in what way it's going to be implemented, what kinds of trials were done to test it. No matter what, if the vaccine comes out soon, which they're saying it has to, then no matter what, this thing is going to be a risk to take. Because, I don't know how familiar a lot of you are with clinical trials, but clinical trials go on for years. And the longer they go on, the longer we are witness to things like long-term side effects. A lot of health problems are not foreseeable, when it comes to things like the side effects of serious medications. A lot of things don't reveal themselves until decades down the road, So no matter what, you are making a great risk to take this vaccination. And I think still at the end of the day, if we know that it will work and prevent the spread of this virus, then we will be morally responsible for taking it. But there is absolutely nothing wrong with being afraid, because you would be taking a huge risk. There's no way that they're going to know what kind of side effects come out of any vaccination that's developed even as far as 2 years down the road. That's still not enough time. So personally, yes, I would take it, but I would also I would really hope that we can all come together and campaign for the highest standard of clinical trials and transparency when it comes to this kind of a thing, And also that there should be so much conversation around the legality of this, because the language of law is something that a lot of people just really don't care about. People don't care about language, period, which is so stupid, because language is how we formulate any of these arguments. The only way I was able to even express any of these sentiments to you was literally with the way that I put my words in a certain order, and the fact that you could understand what each word means. It's fucking nuts. Language is the Legos of all ethics. So the language of law is something that I think we should really be paying attention to as it relates to a thing like this. If there becomes a vaccination and it becomes mandatory to take it for coronavirus, we should be heavily invested in looking at how they are going to mandate this with their language. Because like I said earlier, if the language of law is simply like, okay, the justification, the government can tell you what to do with your body. The government can mandate that you receive this or that vaccination because it benefits the sustainability and livelihood of the group. Then you are opening the door for so many potential abuses where the government can mandate anything and just say it's for the good of the group. It's for your own health. It's for the health of everybody, you know. Now you have to do this or that. You have to do this. You have to get sterilized. You have to have a baby. You have to fucking take this medication. You have to do that. And this? No! I say no. Anyway. Solar Temple. I agree with you about how some government policies are necessary to ensure the safety and well-being of the population at large. All of the people who are not isolating during COVID don't understand this. Yeah. They either don't understand or they don't care. I don't know which is worse. 'Cause yeah, if ultimately the only thing that matters to you is your own livelihood and your own health, and you'll do whatever the fuck you want. I don't care if I get corona. At least I'm gonna go out having a good time. That's all great for you, but you are neglecting your responsibility to other people, you know. And this is a mindset that I think we all kind of live under, especially in capitalism. And I am not some sort of socio-political expert, but this is an attitude that really, really bothers me. And I see it a lot when it comes to especially discussions of like sexualities and identities and weird shit. Like we've seen a lot of pedophilia sympathy and stuff beginning to get more and more serious. A lot of this sentiment is always repeated, and it's always repeated by the same people that are also out here, disparaging all of these hysterical moms and stupid hysterical women and shit too. This idea that do whatever you want as long as it doesn't hurt other people. Do whatever as long as it only affects you, you know. People say as long as it doesn't hurt other people, but the very idea that anything you do, that you could do something that doesn't affect other people is erroneous in and of itself. Whether or not you're just prancing around like a fucking elf with your fake fucking surgically implanted elf ears on or whatever the fuck you're doing, this still affects other people. Literally everything you do affects other people. So I am so averse to this very sentiment that you can do anything that doesn't affect other people. That's a fucking lie, and you need to stop lying to yourself. Everything you do affects other people. Every life choice you make, everything you buy at the grocery store, every fucking shirt you put on, everything. You are not some independent entity that exists and you are just the center of your own universe and nothing can touch you unless you choose to interact with it. That's a fucking lie. Everything you do affects everybody. Everybody. And your freedom to prance around like a fucking elf and fucking do whatever the fuck you want with your fucking surgically implanted elf ears and your freedom to fucking sit on Tumblr and write a child porn fetish fucking kink dumb whatever the fuck dumb bullshit you perverts are always on about. Your freedom to do that rests on the backs of people who are not free. You're only free to sit around and do all your dumb shit in America because people around the world are not free. People are slaving over making your dumb fucking technology devices. They're fucking slaving over getting fucking minerals out of these caves in India children are crawling into so they can make your dumb fucking makeup. Everything you do requires other people. There is no independent action you can take unless you're literally in the middle of the fucking woods, maybe by yourself, maybe then. Anyway, I've said what I have to say. Clearly, everything you do impacts other people, and this thing especially, the question of whether or not you should get vaccinated. My answer, in short, is yes. It is your moral responsibility. At the same time, I mean, a thing like government can only work if it's philosophically sound. So while it's true that it is our moral responsibility to get a thing like a vaccination, especially in the midst of a thing like this incredible pandemic, it's also true that the morality, the ethics of all of these things is never going to be solid, or there can be no easy answers until we also start holding our government and our governmental institutions to a higher standard, especially as it relates to healthcare in the United States. I mean, two things can be true, you know, and not only that, but also the ethics of our very law, you know. We don't even hold them to a high standard. And the reason I say that too is because even though it's true, we're always out here campaigning for this or that, the government is corrupt in this or that way. What do we ever do about it except state that, you know? When are we going to actually investigate the language of law together and make suggestions? Start strategizing towards positive outcomes. We never do that. All we're still doing is pointing out the corruption here and there. We never even talk about how it can be solved. And I think that one of the things that we should really be invested in is literally thinking about the language of law. How can we structure laws in a way that is more, ethically sound? These are the kinds of things that I think all of us these are the kinds of questions that we all can be invested in together, you know? How amazing would that be if we all had conversations like, okay, we disapprove of this facet of government. This is what we think would be better. How about we start strategizing? That's what we're doing with our New Jersey project. So, on that note, anybody who would like to come talk to me about New Jersey and how we can make a pure and perfect ethical government, come into the club Discord for only $1, Phenomenology Club. We have daily quarantine activities, like I've said, and actually it's time to do yoga. So I'm going to get out of here and go do yoga with Phenomenology Club and Adrian, our YouTube yogi superstar, who I love. And then we're going to shred with Jillian motherfucking Michaels. So, thank you all for listening. I hope that doing a video upload made this more fun for you. And I'm going to try to continue in this way. I also hope it was listenable. I don't feel like I did too much visual stuff. So anyway, everyone be safe. Wash your fucking hands, because what you do affects other people. Never fucking forget it, okay? I love you. Goodbye.